In Joshua chapter 10, we get into the next round of challenges that Joshua and the Israelites had to face on their way into the Promised Land. And the challenges this time come in the form of 5 different kings. So the king of Jerusalem, whose name was Adoni-Zedek, rallied some of his friends, whose name were Hoham, he was the king of Hebron, Piram, who was the king of Jarmuth, Japhia, who was the king of Lachish, and Debir, who was the king of Eglon. Some great baby names in there, by the way. Keep those in mind for the next baby that's coming into the family. But he rallied his troops against Joshua and the Israelites, against Gibeon, who they had made a treaty with, because they had heard of the great things that God had done for them. They had heard of the great victories that God had won for them. And so you'd think, well, if they heard of this great God who does great things and who wins great victories for his people, maybe they should just follow him. Maybe they should just believe in him instead of trying to annihilate his people and the people that they make treaties with. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened. Joshua and the Israelites were living by faith, and they faced opposition. And that's important to remember, because it helps us answer the question, why is living by faith sometimes so hard? It's because God has promised that when you live by faith, you're going to find opposition. Jesus talked about it. It's a hard world that we're living in that's getting more destructive and more dangerous the longer it goes. There's an enemy that all of us have in common. The original enemy, the one who tempted Adam and Eve back in the garden. And he works hard against you. Expect opposition. And so don't be so hard on yourself when it's hard to live by faith. It's hard to live by faith. And when that would have been true for Joshua and the Israelites, when these 5 different kings rallied and made a treaty against them, well, of course, Joshua went to the God that he had faith in. And the God that he had faith in, he said something. He said, you don't need to be afraid of them, because I've given them into your hand. A good promise. You don't need to be afraid of them. I've given them into your hand. So they could step forward with confidence, because God told Joshua and the Israelites that God had given them the 5 kings that were coming against them into their hand. But of course, he hasn't made that promise for you. Those 5 kings aren't coming against you. That's not your opposition. It's the challenges to your faith. It's the people who don't support it. It's a world that makes it hard to see God. Those challenges are real, but while God doesn't give you that specific promise of overcoming the 5 kings who aren't coming after you right now, he does give you another one in 1 John chapter 5, where he says that everyone born of God overcomes the world. Everyone born of God. And that's you. Born of God. Born once, physically, when he made you. Born again, when he created faith in your heart. Everyone born of God overcomes more than 5 kings. You overcome everything in the world. That's the promise that God gives you to live on. Expect challenges to your faith, but expect the God that you have faith in to be victorious, and you right alongside of him. That's what Jesus earned for us. That's what Jesus won for us. Rest well tonight, my friends.